Hello, everyone. This is Bob Recalibrate. Thank you very much for joining us for today's webinar. It's a pleasure to have you join us, and we look forward to your participation, questions as we go throughout today's webinar. Today, what we want to discuss is recalibrating your company. Many companies have been and are going through challenging times right now. But what we want to talk about is this today: 6 ways that you can increase your revenue, your profitability, and your flexibility today. So coming out of today's webinar, I'd like to be able to give those 6 ways to you so you can implement them right away today, because it's going to make a difference in terms of 2020 and the success you'll have this year. And as I said, as we go through today's webinar, we want to keep this very interactive. We're going to have a number of polls that we're going to launch today and share results with everybody that's joining us. We also want you to post any questions. So we're going to answer the questions that you have through our Q&A session. But if we don't have a chance to get through all of your questions today, I'll make sure that I follow up with each of you one-on-one. So again, thank you for joining us. Just in terms of my background, myself and Craig Rebbe co-founded On Demand Advisors almost 12 years ago. And what we do is we work and partner with executives that are leading B2B companies. So that's whether they're startups, mid-stage companies, public companies. It's really about our passion, which is revenue growth. What we figured out as we were scaling some very successful companies in Silicon Valley is that there is a playbook to do this. So for many of you, you may bring services, products, or solutions to the marketplace. And there's typically some best practices to be able to do that. But from our perspective, when you think about revenue growth, I know hundreds and hundreds of CEOs. And what I find often is that they spend a lot of time trying out many things, things that don't work. And so what we want to do is share with you some best practices that do work. We want to share with you how to implement them. And we also want to share with you some ideas and companies that are doing that today as far as our clients. I've had the good fortune of being CEO for both public and private companies in Silicon Valley. One of those companies that Craig Rebbe and I work at is a company called Intact, a cloud financial services company. And we partnered with Salesforce. We went to market together with Salesforce. We added 5,000 new customers and 300 sell-to partners. And that company is very successful today, and was acquired by the Sage Group for $850 million and 9 times revenue. So great outcome, great collaboration, and great success. But along the way, we learned a lot in terms of things that we wanted to put in place to scale the company. And we want to share those with you today, as well as the many learnings that we've had with over 300 B2B companies that we work with over the past 12 years. So if you look at today's business climate, today's times, it is uncertain as far as where we are today. For a number of you, you may say that your sales cycles are frozen because of the COVID-19 virus breakout that we've seen. Your prospects may be in a situation where they're uncertain, so avoiding making decisions. Your sales team, as they are working or coming back to work, are looking for ways that they can be efficient to scale up and get qualified leads to work on. I know a lot of you may look at your solutions. Some of those solutions may be what I call must-have solutions. Got to have them. Can't continue business operations without those solutions. Other solutions may be perceived as nice to have. And so one of the things we want to talk about today and in the future is how do you change the view? How do you change the engagement with your clients and with your prospects to help them understand the value that you're going to help them drive with your solution? And then finally, it's really about getting the buyer's attention. So today, there's a lot of noise out there in the marketplace. So you've got to break through that noise. You've got to be able to determine how you're going to move forward. So that's what we want to talk about today. But before we do that, let's launch this poll and ask if you could be kind enough to participate in this, and I'll share the results with everyone today. So what's inhibiting your revenue growth and increased profitability that you have today? So one answer, the first one, is too much trial and error to identify ways to grow revenue. The second one is tying marketing spend into sales outcomes. Third is your cost of sales or client acquisition is too high. A fourth is the need to scale the quantity and quality of sales leads. And then finally, the fifth is need better ways to accelerate your sales process. So today, I'm going to be addressing all of these areas, but I really want to focus on those areas that are going to be most important for you joining us today. So again, thank you for your participation. We're going to keep the poll open here for a couple more seconds. So please go ahead and weigh in. Give us your opinion. Opinions count. Opinions are important. So we always appreciate that. Okay. If everybody has had a chance to give their input, I'm going to share the results with everybody on our call today. Perfect. Thank you for participating. So let's look at the results. So for all of you that have attended today and participated, 7% said you got too much trial and error to identify ways to grow revenue. Another 7% stated that your cost of sales or client acquisition is too high. 40% stated that you need to scale the quantity and quality of sales leads for your team. And the winner in this poll is number 5, which is 47% of you stated that you need better ways to accelerate your sales process. We're going to really give you some very demonstrable ways to do that, by the way, as we continue our discussion today. So thank you for participating, and we'll have another poll in just a little bit. So it's about time to thrive. It's not time to seek. It's not time to survive. It's time to thrive. So today what we want to discuss is these 6 areas. First of all, give your buyer what they need. And how do you figure this out? So for many executives that I know today, they're always trying out different messaging, trying out different offers, trying out to extrapolate off of different conversations with new sales that they have. And so what we want to do is talk about how do you crack the code in terms of what we call buyer intelligence. Because once you do that, it gives you the blueprint in terms of how to message and engage going forward. The second thing we want to talk about is gaining better accountability and ROI. So one of our clients, a gentleman by the name of Jeff Brill, who is the CEO of Junction Solutions, came to us and said, hey guys, I'm spending over $500,000 on marketing spend every year. Help me understand how that translates into sales outcomes. And so tying this together, especially during today, when a lot of folks are looking at holding back in terms of marketing spend, and thinking, I'm not going to spend $1 if I'm not going to get $3 in return. So that type of approach is really important here. The third thing we want to talk about is feeding your sales team. Give them the quality, and I really stress quality, and the quantity of leads that they require. So we're going to talk about how do you improve the quality of the leads, the quality of your engagement, the quality of the self-education that happens with your prospects before they engage your team. The next area is accelerating your cash and sales in the door. So this is the number 1 area. So velocity does matter. So anything you can do to gain velocity and still sustain the quality of the engagement is going to be really important. We're going to share and demonstrate some ways that you can do that today. The 5th is one of my favorites, which is eliminating your top competitor. So what traditionally happens in the B2B engagement with your clients, prospects, customers, is that you spend a lot of money engaging, taking somebody through that buying process. But after you've done all this, you've spent all this investment, oftentimes you end up with no decision, or you end up with a postponed decision. And that's very frustrating. So there's going to be some demonstrable ways that you can eliminate this or reduce this competitor, which is do nothing. And finally, all of us count on partners. Partners are really important. Everybody has an ecosystem out there around your customers, around your prospects, an ecosystem of partners. So the question is, how do you choose and select the right ones that are going to drive revenue for your company and with your company? So it's time to thrive, not just survive. So let's talk about number one. The number one area we'd like to talk about is give your buyer what they want. So if I went to everybody's website on today's webinar and I looked at your homepage, it would probably start off with what you do, the services you provide, the solutions you have, and so forth. And it may even talk about your company, which is fantastic. That's what we call seller content. Buyer content is what's important to your buyer. So your buyer is coming to your homepage, coming to your programs, coming to today's webinar. They have need. They search for need. They search to address the business challenges that they have. They're also looking for opportunities. And so what you really want to have is a connection with the buyer to figure out how to engage with them wherever they may be, and then provide your services and solutions as that aspirant to the headache that they have. So we're going to talk a little bit about that because it's probably one of the most important similar things that you can do, which is moving from seller-based messaging to buyer-based messaging and really connecting with your buyer. Because once you do that, you know that you hit a home run. You know that your buyer really understands that you get them and what's important to them. So we want to talk about how do we work with our clients to crack the code. And cracking the code says, how do you look at buyer intelligence in a way so that you can rigorously understand your buyer and you can talk to enough buyers, interview enough buyers so that this set of interviews, these surveys that you're doing are going to be representative of the larger audience. So whether you're selling to healthcare or financial services, whether you're selling solutions across the horizontal spectrum, whether you're selling to a niche industry or to a niche group, it's always important to understand the buyer. So what we figured out, and we've been doing this, and we've done hundreds of these buyer intelligence surveys, is the best way to really understand your buyer is to rigorously survey them. And so when we do the buyer surveys that we conduct, we're looking at validating the assumptions that you have. So what's the pain and business challenges that you solve and address? What are decision drivers that would drive that inflection point for your prospects or for your customers to make a decision? The value propositions you offer, how important are they? So one of the companies that we work with, just a tremendously successful company called AvidXchange out of North Carolina, is a company that provides accounts payable, invoice management, and e-payment solutions. And I remember we began working with them a number of years ago, and we did a survey with them, a buyer intelligence survey, with their current audience. And this would be the audience of prospects. And we asked that audience to rank the top 20 value propositions that we had put together with the team. And what was really interesting is that the two that ranked the lowest were the two that we were leading with. And so it really gave us an opportunity to assess in a very rigorous way what was the effectiveness of their messaging and engagement, and how could we change that so that we can materially do a much, much better job engaging with them. And it really did. It really was a home run for them. So this type of approach is probably one of the most important things I think about when I think about making sure that you don't waste money. So looking at testing out the buying process, testing out different pricing or investment models, and substitutions. So what we always think is, like in Jeffrey Moore, that if we create a solution that we think it's a blue ocean, if you will. And what we found as we've done a lot of market competitive intelligence, a lot of buyer intelligence, is there's usually substitutes out there. There's usually competitors. And so the question is, how do we understand that landscape better? And then finally, influencers. If they were looking for your type of solution, who would they talk to? Where would they go? How would they go about doing that? So when we do this, as we suggest that perhaps you do this every couple of years, it's about conducting your buyer intelligence survey in the areas of really understand the demographics, the process of what they're doing today in lieu of having your solution or service, what pains or business challenges you solve, and what value propositions you provide, and then really understanding where would they go if they're looking for your type of solution. This way, it's really important that you don't waste money, putting money on bets that aren't going to pay off. So once that survey is concluded, and everybody says in the management team, this is fantastic information, how do you then use it? Well, you create what we call a core messaging document, which is the distillation of the priority that your buyer is stating, the messages that they and offers that they relate to, and then turn that out into meaningful engagement or offers for them. And we're going to talk about that today, whether that's an ebook, whether that's a explainer video, whether that's a process-based infographic to show what they're going to be able to achieve with your solution as far as a much better process. If it's a webinar like today, or a success story, sharing the ROI that your clients have been able to achieve with your solution. So that's the first thing we wanted to talk about today, which is cracking the code with your buyers. If you do that, it changes the way that you operate. It streamlines the engagement that you have with your buyers out there, and it creates this, what I call, frictionless process. Let's talk about the second thing in this area, and that is, what are the offers, and what do those look like? So at On-Demand Advisors, we love to be innovative. We love to create breakthrough innovations and engagement vehicles that you can use with your target audience. And so here's some of these. If you were out there trying to create awareness, perhaps the best practices checklist that you're going to provide, or it's an explainer video to share with your audience what you actually do in a very significant way. Another example would be a process infographic, which would be, what does the process look like before your solution? What does the process look like after your solution? And where is the gain? Where's the value that you achieve? So these are some excellent ways for you to create that original awareness. Once the interest is expressed, perhaps you want to give them a buyer's guide. So if I don't know how to buy your service or solution today, tell me what's important. Tell me the things that should be critical to me. Give me a roadmap on how I should go through this process. If you don't do that, chances are you're going to have your buyer or prospects wandering in the desert. Another great example that we're going to talk about today is a sales-driven website. This is really probably, again, just like the survey, the buyer intelligence survey, it's also one of the most important things we'll look at today. So everybody has a website. Everybody that's attending today has a website. The question is, what does your website do for you? It's the most important part of real estate that you have today, yet you need to be able to make that website, that real estate work hard for you. So we're going to talk about that. The fourth area that we all are involved with is with your prospective buyer who's expressed interest, is conducting their discovery, helping them through their journey. And then the fifth or fourth area over here is conducting the evaluations. So for your sales team or for your partner sales channel, it's giving them the tools, giving them the right engagement vehicles that you're going to need with your target audience. So that's the prospect engagement roadmap. Let's talk about number two, which is getting better accountability and ROI. So as you look at your spend today, a lot of companies are pulling back their investment. What you're looking at is, like, from my perspective, is for $1 you spend, what's the ROI that's invested in return to you? So we're going to talk about connecting the dots. So when you're thinking about engagement with your audience, you're going to want to create what's called market qualified leads. Those are people that are expressing leads, interest in your solutions. But the key now is to convert them into what's called sales qualified leads. And how do you do that? We're going to talk about how do you actually create sales qualified leads today. Then, of course, it's taking them through that buying, selling journey to become a sale and revenue for your company. So having accountability and making sure you're spending in the right places, on the right programs, on the right engagement is really important. That's talking about better profitability. This is the revenue acceleration map. When we first produced this map, we were scaling intact as a cloud software as a service solution and adding those 5,000 customers. And we built this with the idea that every company has to master this revenue creation process. But we now have perfected this over many years with many clients. And we're going to share that with everybody that's attending today's webinar. Let's look at what we call funnel math or revenue engineering. Let's say your goal was to get another $4 million of revenue in the door for your company in 2020 in this one area. Let's say it's healthcare. And you realize that your average transaction value, or ACV, annual contract value, is $100,000. So you're going to need 40 new transactions this year. If you back up and your conversion rate is 25%, that means that you need to create 160 sales qualified leads this year. For most B2B companies, when someone's expressing interest in your company, such as a market qualified lead, that means that 1 out of 10 of those that are participating are going to turn into sales qualified leads. So that really means that for this area of healthcare, we need to create 1,600 market qualified leads per year, 133 per month. We need to convert those market qualified leads into 160 sales qualified leads per year, and then 13 per month. And then your sales team needs to close those opportunities, and get those 40 transactions, 40 new customers for the year. What's great about this is when you think about your business this way, it gives you visibility to not only where you are in terms of staging your buyer and prospects along the way, but it also gives you visibility into future quarters. So one of the challenges many of us have is not only tying our marketing spend into sales outcomes, but also the board of directors, your investors, other stakeholders are going to ask you for visibility into the future. So this gives you a way to be able to do that. Look at the visibility that you have. So one quick thing you'll notice about the revenue acceleration map here that we're sharing with you is the strategic areas of putting up the map here are in purple. It's really thinking through what you need to do. It's thinking through the strategic things that need to get done. The red is marketing. The red is really about marketing and lead qualification. The yellow is sales and sales acceleration, sales optimization. And number 7 over here is about revenue expansion. Different ways, different innovations that you can use to really expand your revenue growth. So for instance, at Intact, half of our revenue came direct and the other came to partners. So perfecting the partner channel and making sure that we had the right partners that were going to drive revenue growth for us consistently was really important. So we created something called the Channel Partner Scorecard. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. So anyway, those are some excellent examples. So being able to tie these things together and be able to measure them and see how one is caused and the other is effect. The third area that we want to talk about as far as helping you recalibrate your company is feeding your sales team. So as your customers come back to work, as every different markets come online, you essentially want to be in a position that as you bring aboard those furloughed employees or you bring aboard your sales team, that you can feed them with the quantity and quality of sales leads. We also want to talk about giving them right tools to execute their sales cycle flawlessly. So let's talk about that. We talked about the prospect engagement roadmap. And again, out of that survey process we talked about, you now are going to create this wonderful prospect engagement roadmap going forward. And depending upon where your prospect is and their engagement with you, you have the right tools, the right vehicles, the right offers to engage and work with them. So this becomes really important in terms of helping your prospect, helping your prospective buyer each step of their journey. And when you do that, you can scale this and you can see how you're going to create the preponderance of leads and opportunities that your sales team is going to need. What I've always felt is that every company, each of you, should be in a position where you're generating 100% of the sales leads that your company needs every year. If you do that, when you hire and you train and you provide the competencies for your sales organization, they can focus on what they're good at doing, which is converting interest into engagement in converting engagement into a customer. And that's really rewarding, and that's really the best way to use the different resources that you have for this end. The second thing is giving your sales team the right tools to convert market qualified leads into sales qualified leads. So the challenge most companies have is they generate leads. Let's say you go to a trade show. Let's say you send out a campaign this week. Let's say you do a webinar. You're going to generate X number of leads. But as you look at the ratio we talked about earlier, a conversion rate, perhaps only 10% of those interested parties are going to be ready to go through and engage with the sales process with you through their buying process. So what do you do with the other 90%? Well, in the past, you may have heard that people would say, well, put them into a nurturing campaign. I don't think that's not sufficient. What you want to do instead is give your sales team and the buyer the tools that they're going to need to become sales qualified, sales ready. And what I mean by that is you may provide a buyer's guide for them about how to evaluate and to look at your type of solution, where the value is. You may give them an ROI blueprint on helping them figure out how they're going to cost justify that. You may provide a process optimized infographic that's going to enable them to understand the before and after your solution. You may give them a quick start program to get them started quickly for deployment so that they can do their land and expand and deploy your solution across their enterprise. Down below are some really great calls to action. Perhaps it's a compliance or risk assessment. Perhaps it's a diagnostic benchmark. Perhaps it's an ROI study. So there are a lot of ways, and this is another area that I find there's so much opportunity that you have today, is many of you may not be taking advantage of all the opportunities to engage with your buyer and provide meaningful ways to move them forward through the process. So we're just discussing a number of them today, but they're all really important. Let's talk about the number one thing that you mentioned in the first poll today, which is accelerating sales and cash in the door. So velocity really matters. And what you're really looking for is the shortest sales cycle possible, the fastest path to profitability for your company, and being able to do that with every new customer or every current customer. So there are ways that we're going to talk about today where you can accelerate your sales cycle. And we're going to talk about three in particular. Number one is transforming your website into what we call a sales-driven website. And we're going to talk about one today, a customer of ours, and how we've done that with them. Number two is making sure you got the quantity and quality of leads so that your sales team can be very efficient. And number three is talking about the conversion offers. It's all about converting. If somebody's interested initially in your solution or service, it's about converting them into engagement. Once they're engaged with you, it's about converting them through that buying process that they're going through. If they're engaged in the buying process, it's about converting them from evaluation to becoming a customer of yours and the implementation. If they're in the implementation, it's about helping them achieve the ROI that they expect. If they've achieved the ROI, it's about going back and finding out what are the other areas where you can add value in that relationship. So it's this virtuous circle, if you will, that you're creating each and every day. So let's talk about accelerating your sales cycle, because that's number one. So velocity, as we said, really matters. This is one of our clients, a company called Technical Toolboxes, located in Houston, Texas. And they're a leader in engineering performance management solutions in the oil and gas industry. So they provide a variety of different solutions to many engineering organizations across the oil and gas industry. Midstream is their main focus, but they also work with upstream and downstream companies. And so what we did is we took their website, which is a great website in terms of informing people, and converted that into a sales-driven website. So what the website now allows you to do is choose, if I'm coming to the website, I can choose to come in and look at, I'm a corrosion engineer. So I work in the oil and gas industry at anticipating, evaluating, and preventing corrosion. So take me through the buyer's journey in terms of what you would do for a corrosion engineer. And as you can see on here, what we're doing is we're talking about the overview. We're talking about the challenges and solutions for the corrosion engineer. We're talking about FAQs, the most frequently asked questions that Technical Toolboxes receives from this audience, sharing with some very specific clients that are using the solution, and talking about meaningful next steps. So this is what we call the buyer's journey. So we just took something that was static and we converted this into a meaningful journey with the right content, the right information that's important to the corrosion engineer. Another example would be I'm coming in and I need to manage the pipeline life cycle for all of my pipelines I have. And so what I'm really interested in is how does Technical Toolboxes help me do that? So help me understand what's the solutions you have for managing each of the 4 phases of the life cycle for the pipeline. What are the challenges that you address? What are the solutions you provide? Again, taking me through that process. And the clients, really understanding other clients like me, because you've got over 400 major oil and gas operators and solution providers. It shares with me the confidence of knowing that Technical Toolboxes have been doing this for many years and doing a very good job into providing excellent ROI and value to their customers. So this website allows us to accelerate the process, the sales process, and the engagement process from the buyer. Why is that important? Well, because you have a cost of sales. And when your website can view the front-end education, that's going to accelerate the sales process for you. It's going to also decrease the cost of sales. One of the interesting things from the corporate executive board is that they put out a stat this year that stated that 57% of the sales cycle is already completed by the time your prospect engages the salesperson at your company. That means that your website is really important in terms of helping that front end of the sales process, the education that should happen, and the things that are going to be important to your buyer. That's what we call the moment of truth. So that's on velocity, and we wanted to talk about that. And we've also talked a little bit about what you can do for your sales organization. So it's not only about helping somebody through this buyer's journey and having the right way for them to opt in on your website, it's also giving your sales team and your prospective audience the tools that they're going to need to be able to justify, evaluate your solution, justify your solution, look at other companies that are just like them, that are using your solution, and then be able to move forward. Let's talk about number 5. Number 5 is probably my favorite because it's something that we know exists, but it's something that a lot of times we're not sure what to do with that. And that's your top competitor, which is do nothing. So what we find as you go through your sales cycle with your sales team, one of the most frustrating things that you do is go through that entire process and find out that something then ends in no decision. And so we want to talk about a number of ways that you can change the dynamics on this to move people through the sales process that you're engaging with, help give them the tools. So focus on solving the problem, not the evaluation. What we mean by that is perhaps a good way to work with your audience is to provide an assessment or a benchmark analysis for them that's going to focus in on the ROI or the risk assessment or the competitive intelligence that they're looking for or the best practices that they can apply in their specific area. That's hugely valuable for most executives because what they're really looking for is help me understand demonstrably where I'm going to be able to improve. It also allows you to meaningfully engage up front without just taking somebody through the sales cycle. Let's talk about another way to do this. We call this the land and expand strategy, which is start small, prove value and benefit, and then ROI. So you may want to create a quick start program. So what we find a lot of times is enterprise companies will go through this large evaluation, and then after the end of the evaluation, they're going to say, well, we want to pilot this in this division or this area first before we roll it out to the company. So what we're suggesting here is perhaps you want to start with that first as an offer and realize it's going to be some type of deployment across the company anyway, so we'll be able to do that. Another thing that we look at is there are a lot of companies out there that give what we call free trials. Let's sign up for a free trial of our service or solution. And a lot of times it's hard to convert those. Sometimes people get lost in the trial of your solution instead of learning more. So maybe a facilitated workshop would be a better approach, or a guided implementation that you would have in your innovation center. One of our clients has an innovation center that they've created, and it's a marvelous way for their prospects to actually see how that innovation would be realized in person. And it's a great way for them to be able to test before they jump in. Another way is to exceed the ROI threshold. So when you're selling to the enterprise, a lot of times there is a capital appropriation request that you have to go through and provide to the financial office. So what we're suggesting a lot of times is just engage the CFO early, making sure that you understand how they're going to look at your investment, how they're going to judge the ROI, and then provide that basis of information before the decision is made. And then finally, mitigating their risk to buy. This is the area where everybody becomes a little bit paralyzed in the process. And that is, I went through this process. I think you're a great company. I think you have a great solution, but I'm concerned about whether I should follow through. So the best way to do that is to provide other customers that have achieved the benefits and the ROI just like them. So you can do that a couple of different ways. We found you can do that through customer case studies. We also found that you can do that through industry case studies. So for instance, when we work with one of our clients, ICUC, which is one of the largest social media management services companies in the world, their clients may be Google or Starbucks or Novartis or Macy's. These are really iconic companies. So those iconic companies typically don't allow you to use their name and their logo as a testimonial, but you can still tell the story about what you've been able to achieve with them through an industry case study. And then finally, transition to delivering success. What we find in many cases is that when you're involved with working through the evaluation process with your customer, the challenge a lot of times is moving them from evaluation to implementation. And so if you introduce a customer service manager or success manager, and it's really helping them envision what's going to be the end state when they implement your service or solution and how do they benefit from that, that's going to really change them. And I've always found that this is interesting when you're engaged with a prospective company. The moment they start envisioning the value that they're going to receive from your service is the moment they turn the switch on about how could life be with you moving forward. Let's talk about number 6. This is another way to really move the needle for your company today, and that's get better partners to drive sales. So all of us need partners, whether those are referral partners, reseller partners, or private label partners, as we talk about these different categories. And why do you need partners? Well, because no matter how big your organization is in the sales footprint, there's always areas that you can't get to. There's always areas that you could use some leverage or help. That could be moving to your distribution channel to EMEA, to Europe. It could be about getting into another vertical or industry where you're currently not. It could be about getting into smaller companies where you don't have the footprint today to get into those companies. So for instance, when I was at Intact, we half of our channel partners were CPA firms. So they would provide their services to a lot of their clients or smaller companies that we actually didn't have the reach to get to. So it's a great way to be able to do that. So selecting the right partners is really important. And of course, as you think about the partners, we want to talk about one of the most important things, which is creating your partner scorecard. This is something that we did with a company called Gather Digital. And Gather Digital provides great solutions for going to a conference. So on your smartphone, you go to a conference and you would use their solution on your smartphone to identify what are the rooms, what's the agenda, who are the speakers, download the presentation, integrate with and communicate with other attendees, really make this a wonderful interactive experience going to that conference. And so they developed a fantastic set of solutions. So when they thought about leveraging their partner channel, we started mapping out their ecosystem of all the companies that are selling either software solutions or services to the event space. And so we mapped out over 100 different potential partners for them. And what we did is we came up with 10 criteria that were important for them to determine whether that was going to be a good partner that was going to drive revenue for them. And then we ranked and rated every partner on that scale. It allowed them then to focus at Gather Digital on which partners were going to be the most important for them to engage and prioritize those partners, because like every company, their bandwidth was limited. And it became a very successful outcome for them because one of those partners didn't have the mobile event solutions that they were looking for. They had not developed that, but it was necessary for them to grow their company. So they actually acquired Gather Digital. So we talked about mapping the ecosystem, and this is one of the things we looked at with the scorecard for them. So with Ashfield Meetings, which is a event management meeting company, we looked at these 10 different criteria, and they rated very high on the scoring channel. So when we thought about who the Gather Digital was going to engage, this was one of the companies that was at the top of the list. So it's a great way to be able to do this. So what we just walked you through today in today's webinar is 6 ways to really thrive today. One is to crack the code and really understand your buyers in a rigorous way. 2 is to tie marketing and sales outcomes together so that one begets the other in terms of outcomes, and you know where the ROI is for your investments. The third one is talking about feeding your sales team, creating that demand generation engine. And by the way, for you, those of you that are attending today, we're going to talk about having a free breakout conversation one-on-one with you after today's webinar to talk about any area of interest that you have so that we can cover this in greater detail. The fourth area, which is number 1 according to our survey today, is accelerating your sales and being able to do that a couple of different ways because velocity matters. The fifth is eliminating number 1 competitor, which is do nothing. And then the 6th area we talked about is recruiting better partners for your company. All right, here's our second poll that we'd like to launch today. And what's your major takeaway from today's webinar? So if you could share us real time your thoughts on this, that would really be helpful. And then of course, we'll share with everybody what those results are. So go ahead and take a moment or two and say, what's the major takeaway? So is your major takeaway to, hey, this is great, Bob. How do we reach and engage our entire audience and do that in a meaningful way? It may be these are a lot of great ideas that you're hearing perhaps for the first time, and you're not really sure what's going to be most important, but we'd like to think about that for a while. Another is accelerating your sales cycle and conversions that we talked about. Getting better partners to drive revenue growth is the 4th area. And then putting in place a revenue growth engine, as we talked about earlier. And we're going to share that with everybody. We'll send that PDF to you as a result of today. So go ahead, if you would, take a moment or two, add in, weigh in, and of course, start thinking about, as you're putting your ideas here as far as a poll, think about questions that you have that we can answer today. So let me go ahead and share the results of the poll with everybody on today's call. Okay, 13% of you stated that the most important takeaway is reaching and engaging your entire audience. So for those of you that stated that, if you want us to take you through, myself or our team to take you through an example of a buyer intelligence survey and how that allows you to engage with them, happy to do that. 13% stated that you're really taking away these ideas and thinking through what's going to be most important for you. Another 13% started down the path of the sales acceleration, sales cycles, and how to accelerate that. And we shared with you a couple ways to do that, either through the conversion offers that we talked about, or through a sales-driven website, as we shared with you with technical toolboxes. 27% stated that your major takeaway is getting better partners. And so perhaps talking about how to create the channel partner scorecard that we talked about will enable you to choose, select, and engage better partners. And then finally, the top one is putting in place the revenue growth engine that we shared with you. Now, everything on that revenue growth engine that we shared with you on the map is something in one way, shape, or form that you may have in place today. It may not be working, it may be invisible, or it may be performing today. So maybe it's just about taking other parts of that revenue acceleration engine and getting them to that point of acceleration and optimization. Okay, so thank you for participating in that. Let me go ahead and hide the poll, and let's move on with our webinar. What I'd like to do at this point in time is just open this up for Q&A. So please go ahead, post the questions that you have. This is just a wonderful part in terms of our webinar, in terms of addressing questions that you may have. Okay, this one is from Suzanne. Suzanne says, tell me a little bit about what you think is the best way to jumpstart our sales today, given our team has been off for 2 months. That's a good question, Suzanne. I think that the best way to do that, the most meaningful way, is to start creating the demand. The demand, as we talked about, reaching your audience, putting in what we call the demand generation engine, which I'm happy to walk you through. Be able to put that in place and be able to scale that is really important, because I've always felt that leads should lead headcount, meaning that what you don't want to do is don't want to allow people to be sitting on their hands or doing something that's going to be suboptimal. But once you start creating sufficient demand, significant demand, and the right demand for your company, it really materially changes the end outcome for you, and also the ROI. Here's a question about the buyer intelligence survey that we talked about, and this is from William. William asked, how long does this process take? So William, this process that we talked about doing the survey, in fact, a great example is Craig and I were in South Carolina last week, and we were with a client of ours in South Carolina. And what we did is we sat down with them, and we actually created the survey guide that we're going to use with their audience with them. So we created the guide. We're going to basically refine that guide, and it represents about 30 questions that we're going to be asking their target audience. Once we're done doing that, we're going to launch the survey, and that'll probably take about another 2 to 4 weeks to be able to go through the survey. Some surveys are fast, some are slow. And then we're going to present the results of the survey to the management team at our client in South Carolina. And then we're going to take about 10 days to distill that into what we call the core messaging document, which is the prioritized information that we're going to use to work with them to engage that audience for the next 12 to 24 months. So all told, it's probably about a 4 to 6 week process to be able to go through that process that we just shared with you. But thank you very much for that. This is a question from Jamie. Jamie said, can you share a little bit more about revenue engineering? So that's something that we talked about in the first part. See if I can bring up that map for us here. That would be helpful. So revenue engineering that we talked about is something that we find extremely relevant and important. And let me just come back to the revenue acceleration map here for a second and share that with you. So you can see right down here, this is revenue engineering and the 3 funnels. This first funnel, as you notice, is right underneath lead generation. The second funnel is under lead management, and the third funnel is under sales. So essentially, through your initiatives, your activities, you're creating these 3 funnels. And this is the way to engineer the outcomes that you want for revenue. So I hope that that helps address that. And by the way, we're happy to step you through. I'm happy to step you through a model where we talk about how would you do that today? How would you engage or build the 3 funnels for different markets or audiences that you have? So as we talk about our company and what On Demand Advisors does, we are a true revenue growth agency. Not only do we bring these best practices to the table to share with you and these innovations, but we also provide the resources to help you get the job done if you don't have the resources internally to do that. And that's very often we're complementing and we're supplementing what our clients have today. And of course, here is many of our clients. You can see they're all different logos, different size companies. It's just truly fabulous to be able to be in a position to be able to do that. And let's talk a little bit about, let's see, one more question up here. Okay. Let me go ahead and answer these questions. Do you have strategies around for identifying the need to balance internal capability to successfully identifying the need to balance? So I think what you're talking about is the need to balance what you can do inside the company and what you don't. Some things, let me share the answer with you. Some things you'll find that you're going to need to have competencies inside your company. But other things you're going to find, for instance, working with us to do a buyer intelligence survey, you may decide to partner with us to do. So when we sit down, we always ascertain what you have, first of all, inside your company and what's missing. The key to any plan, though, when you create your revenue growth plan, is to be able to execute the plan to achieve your results. So as we think about next steps here, assessing one of these 6 areas, happy to do that, follow up with you and set up a time to do that. Creating your revenue growth plan so it's actionable and efficient. Start off with maybe a high impact, high ROI project, or continue your path to apply these revenue growth practices. So our next webinar that we're going to have in just 8 days is going to be on June 30th. And what we're going to focus on that webinar is how do you help remote employees excel in a post-COVID-19 world? So we're going to talk about 10 ways that you can do that. That's really important because I noticed on the news today, I noticed that even though New York is opening up, about 90% of the people that were polled stated that they still wanted to work from home. So that's going to be an ongoing issue for most companies. So the question is, how do you balance that? And how do you get the most out of your employees as they decide to work remotely or from home? So that would be great, and to be able to have you join us on June 30th. And we'll send you an invitation for that. With that, on behalf of myself, our team, Craig Remy, myself, I would like to thank everybody for joining us for today's webinar. We hope that you found this truly valuable, meaningful in terms of recalibrating your company, moving forward to a very successful 2020. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. Here's my contact information, rjakowski@ondemandadvisors.com. This is my cell phone number. You're welcome to call anytime, or please do visit our website. And thank you, everybody, for attending today's webinar. We look forward to our continuous engagement to help you make 2020 a very successful year for you and your company.